Hello, coders, and welcome to another How to Code Well podcast. Today we're going to be talking about Agile, and I'm talking to Scott Ambler, who knows a thing or two about Agile. Hi, Scott. How's it going?
Hey, pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. It's a bit wet here in England. How's things over in Toronto?
Hot and muggy, so not exactly our normal weather, but the rain is coming down in liquid form as opposed to snow form. Okay.
Awesome. So you're a chief scientist at Disciplined Agile. Before we talk about what Disciplined Agile is, can we talk about your background and how you got into the industry?
Yeah, sure. So I've been I started out as a coder, I guess, in the early 80s, early to mid 80s. One of those old guys that have actually coded on cards and then go ahead and bore everybody with that story because card programming is just so fun. Anyways, so started Fortran on cards and then all that good sort of stuff, and worked as a developer into the mid to late 90s. But while I was doing that, I really got interested in process stuff. I was always asking the question, how does this work? How do we make this more effective? And how do we work with others more effectively? And went back to school, got a master's in information science with a focus on the usability and UX design of groupware. Well, at the time it was called groupware. I guess it still is called groupware. But some of the things that we take for granted, like Skype that we're talking on right now. It's real rocket science in back in the early 90s, and we were working on things like trying to answer questions like what type of frame refresh rate can we get away with? Can we get away with like one picture every couple seconds, because that was the level of bandwidth that we were dealing with.
Wow.
So
yeah,
very different today when bandwidth is pretty much more than you need. So, but
awesome.
and then got into the process stuff and. In the early 2000s, led the development of the Agile modeling method, and as well as the Agile data method, where we answered the question, how do you do this Agile stuff for database work, and then moved into looking at even bigger picture, and that eventually evolved into Disciplined Agile delivery, which I co-developed with Mark Lyons, and then eventually that evolved into what we now call the Disciplined Agile toolkit.
Wow. Awesome. That's you've got a very wide array of technical knowledge there. I mean, starting from card programming. That's something that I've always wanted to do. I've never done it, and it's always something that I think that I think every programmer at some point should try it.
But it's interesting. I agree with it. Well, first, I would suggest not doing it that way. That it still keeps the mystery and the romance alive. But
true.
But but it really forced you to become a good coder, because at best we could compile once a night. So we had to do our coding during the day. We would then submit the cards at night, and then in the morning we'd come back and hopefully things ran. It rarely happened that way, but worst case, you'd have a printout. You hopefully have errors or error messages, which wasn't always the case. You'd have an error that, hey, something crapped out in this 5,000 lines of code. You might want to look into that. Would be sometimes the level we would get, but we would have to go and hand review the this code printout, figure out which of the huge deck of cards you've got where something might be, and then redo the cards again, and then submit, and then hopefully the next day you get it. So at least we were compiling once a day, which was sort of lost in the late 80s and early 90s. This idea of compiling and integrating at least every 24 hours was lost. And then it came back in the 90s with Microsoft and others, but and more effective compilers. But it really was, we moved away from that for a long time, where you'd only compile every few weeks or a few months, which seems absolutely crazy these days. But so it's compiling once a day was really sort of leading edge until at least into the mid 90s.
Wow. Why do you think we moved away from that?
Well, we moved away from cards, right? And we had, we had these, line, first of all, line editors, which was really rocket science, which, cards with keyboards. But then we moved to these 80 character wide by 32 characters, 32 lines, whatever the size was, of like full screen code editors at the time, which was really amazing. And like, it really was, I'm making fun of it, but it really was amazing. And we then could start, saving, and we were saving these files electronically. Wow. As opposed to on these physical cards. And we got sloppy. And we realized, why go through this hassle of, compiling once a day? What a pain in the butt that was, when we could write a big pile of code and then compile, every few weeks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And we really did lose it. And it was sort of a shame.
Right. Yeah. So how can you talk us through the story of the transition between Coda to working in Agile? How did that happen? Well,
it wasn't really a it was more of a learning thing. So I got in the early to mid 90s, I guess, I started getting wrapped up in the process stuff. And at the time, it was all heavyweight, waterfallish, CMM, stuff. I actually co-developed the first CMM level 5 compliant object-oriented development process called the OOSP, the Object-Oriented Software Process, which was actually quite impressive at the time. It's a little bit embarrassing now, but it really was actually fairly solid. And so I really got wrapped up into that, but it really wasn't working. And it was working to a degree, but it was phenomenally wasteful and slow, and you'd actually get involved in these large projects, and it was obviously a disaster. And there was so much paper pushing going on, and all this non-coding activity, and some of it was valuable, but a lot of it really wasn't. I couldn't help but notice that, like, I'm a firm believer in observing what works as opposed to doing what I'm told, and so I was observing this stuff just wasn't working. And I just started asking, well, how do we make it lighter weight? And then it was about that time, and it started getting into the rational unified process, which now everybody knows is evil and Satan worshiping type stuff. But at the time, it was leading edge software engineering, and some of it still is. Like, this is one of the things that I get upset about when people bash RUP. And usually you ask basic questions, so like, did you even bother to read about the RUP? Well, no, I just know it's evil. I don't need to know anything about it. Really, grow up. So, because it's interesting. The Agile community is still in the process of reinventing things that were in the RUP years ago.
Right.
And certainly there was RUP definitely got misused and abused, and the management crowd got a hold of it and it was all over, right? So, but anyways, and managers, I'm not bashing managers. Managers can be very, very effective and useful and valuable people, but certainly sometimes they do way too much bureaucracy for their own good. But anyway, so the RUP got abused, and just like other things get abused. So, but anyways, there's a bunch of good stuff there. And then, and my question was, well, how do I lighten up RUP? And I eventually developed what became the Agile Unified Process, which then, which sort of like too little, too late type of a thing. But that works very well. But coming out of that was Agile modeling, and the Agile modeling method. So, and our focus at that time was on how do you do this lightweight modeling and sketching and post-it notes. So, like the things that we take for granted today in the Agile community that you would sketch on a whiteboard, or you can use Post-it notes on a wall. That was radical stuff. And this was evil. I got into a lot of conversations where I was like the evil bastard of the universe for even proposing that a whiteboard sketch was a real model.
Right.
This was heresy. This really was heresy.
Wow.
And it certainly wasn't what the modeling tool companies, none of which exist anymore, for the most part. I shouldn't say that. There's still a few pretty good companies out there that are delivering fairly decent, electronic or digital modeling tools. But for the most part, they never really went anywhere. And so, which is okay. But so the things we take for granted now, that are just totally, completely normal, was real rocket science back then. And of course, the Agile community has reinvented terms because we all know that modeling is evil, but mapping is okay, right? So this is the level of thinking we have in the Agile community sometimes. Modeling evil, mapping good. So it's like, okay, whatever. But so we don't do modeling anymore. We do mapping,
right?
And that's whatever.
So let's sort of go through like a glossary of terms just to ensure that everyone's on the same page for those watching and listening. So waterfall, let's start with that. What is waterfall? Yeah,
so all these terms, I suspect you're going to go through are fuzzy at best.
Right.
So waterfall generally refers to a serial approach to the life cycle where you start with your requirements analysis, and then you get into architecture and design, and then coding, then testing, and then eventually releasing to production. And there's always feedback cycles there, and that was all the waterfall people say, well, it was never really a pure waterfall. But having been on many almost pure waterfalls, I can certainly say that wasn't the case. But anyway, so the idea is you work in this serial order,
right,
and for the most part with difficult feedback cycles, shall we say, and eventually you'll get the work out the door. Now the problem with that, of course, is that it's predicated on this idea that you have all the time in the world and you have all the money in the world to spend, and that people can tell you up front what they want, which we know is not the case. And if you actually take the time to read the original paper by Winston Royce about the waterfall lifecycle, he's phenomenally clear that's a bad idea, that it doesn't scale, and don't do this. Yet that part of the paper, and then he went on to talk about working in iterative and incremental manner, basic Agile type things, or some of the fundamentals of Agile, but then that was ignored because that's not what the consulting companies and the government wanted to hear at the time.
Sure, yeah. I don't know if this is the right term, but I kind of working on some projects before where it was waterfall. There was often more big bang releases in the sense that there wasn't really many pushes to production until a certain real hard deadline was in place. Is that correct? That waterfall is more big bang?
Yeah, it's more big bang. They tend to push a lot of the risk to the end of the life cycle.
Yeah.
And this is where the management folks jump in, and they throw all this bureaucracy into the process to try to reduce the risk, and they really don't. They generate a lot of paperwork and a lot of facade that the risk is being dealt with, and certainly some risk is getting paid down. Sure. But you fundamentally, because you're pushing testing towards the end, because a lot of your critical feedback is towards the end, you still take on these risks. And so for example, I do a lot of consulting in the governance space, and IT governance is pretty much based still on waterfall thinking, and they hold all these reviews throughout the life cycle, and then they still get burned at the end of the life cycle. They get burned in system integration testing or in UAT, and that's because those are the points where they're actually addressing the risks of, does the architecture work? In SIT, that's what SIT is all about. Does the architecture work? Do these boxes talk to each other? That's the fundamental risk you're paying down. So if you're getting burned in SIT, that tells you all this architecture and design risk stuff you thought you were doing, you really weren't. You were holding a lot of nice facade going on, but you really weren't paying down those risks because you're still getting burned at the end of the life cycle. Or if you're getting burned in UAT, then that tells you any sort of risk around, do the end users like what they see? You didn't really pay down those risks until you got burned in UAT, and then you're getting a lot of bad news coming your way. Right at the very end of the life cycle, when you're out of money and you're out of time, and bad things have already happened. So this, I think, is the fundamental challenge that we see with these waterfall serial approaches, is that they really do push risk to the end of the life cycle, and they really do inject cost and time and expense that isn't necessary. Now, there's a few places where this waterfall serial stuff makes sense.
Okay.
Typical, like very low risk things. We've done this a million times before, so doing it one more time is a no-brainer. If that's the type of project you've got in front of you, then, and you've got the skills to do waterfall, then do waterfall. But otherwise, it's really not such a great idea.
So what would you say Agile solves that Waterfall couldn't?
Well, I think the primary values I see in Agile are the shorter feedback cycles.
Right.
So we're getting, and so as a result, we can steer. Now, the problem with asking for feedback is you get feedback, which you maybe act on. So act on appropriately. And this can be frustrating, and it also promotes greater collaboration, particularly between technical people and the stakeholders, the customers and the business and all those good people. So, and that increases the chance of you actually producing something that makes sense and that will actually delight your customers and bring value to the organization.
Okay. So, what are the misconceptions then of Agile? I mean, I can think of a couple, but what would you say are the most common misconceptions?
Well, I think there's a lot of fake Agile going on out there, and
right, okay.
you get these hackers that they just want to code, and I just want to play with toys, just want to code. I know better. I'm smarter than you, and which could actually be true, but I'm smarter than you. I just want to code. Leave me alone. And they say, I'm Agile because I'm not writing any documents. I'm Agile because I'm not doing this or not doing that, and that's just nonsense. So you're hacking, and you want to hack, fine, go off and hack, but don't present that as Agile. And so there's a lot of this fake Agile going on. There's also a lot of and to be fair, I don't think the programmers are purposely lying. I just don't think they know any better, and because they're hearing this message from others that Agile's all about coding, rah 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 rah. And certainly coding is important, but so are the things. So are working with your customers. So are design skills and architecture skills, and actually produce something that's going to stand the test of time, and not just building yet another silo application. So we can really do better, and we need to do better. So I think there's that as a challenge. There's also Martin Fowler coined this term, the Agile Industrial Complex, a while back, and it was basically like all these huge consulting companies are out there just putting everybody out and saying, oh yeah, these are Agile people, go for it, and the people hiring them don't know, right? They just don't know enough about Agile to detect. Is this consulting company actually spinning a story that's truthful? And this is exacerbated by all of these questionable certifications that are out there.
Okay.
Now, I'm a firm believer. Now, and to be fair, to be upfront, Disciplined Agile consortium, we do have certifications, but our philosophy is that you have to earn them. Right. So we've got this, wacky idea that an Agile coach should actually be experienced in Agile. And we insist that a certified Disciplined Agile coach has at least 5 years experience in Agile. Right. So,
right.
And there's very few, it's whereas, other groups, other methods or frameworks, or whatever, you take a 2-day course, suddenly you're a master. You take a 4-day course, suddenly you're a program a certified program consultant or whatever it is. Those are wonderful get rich quick schemes, but they seed the market with a lot of people who really don't have the background to do the job. And don't get me wrong, there's some great people out there with those certifications that are doing a wonderful job, but there's also a lot of people that really don't know what they're doing. Sure. And if you're new to Agile, or if you're an executive who can who barely understands IT and software development to begin with, and now you're being asked to hire Agile people, and you get all these people coming at you with the certifications, which all sound good. How the heck do you decide? How the heck do you know? And to be fair, I think the executives park their brains at the door when they're doing this. It's harsh to say, but they really do. So, for example, I get this. I hear because my company helps organizations do transformations. We're constantly working with executives and coaching them, and they say, "Oh, I don't." And they know they understand they don't know what they're doing for the most part, and they go, "How the heck can I find an Agile coach? I don't know what to look for." And it's like, and they're overwhelmed, and they stop and they just give up for somehow. And I said, so, and the analogy I like to use is one of hiring a soccer coach. Like I know nothing about soccer. You kick a ball down a field and you try to get a goal. That's my level of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But I've got a young daughter, and if I had to hire a soccer coach for her, knowing almost nothing about soccer, I at least know to ask, well, has this soccer coach ever played soccer? Mm-hmm. Right? Like you would expect a soccer coach to have played soccer at some point in their life. You would expect them to have maybe a few years under their belt playing soccer. Like
sure.
I would expect some story where, they were a kid, they played soccer, and they came up through the ranks, and they maybe played for their local town or for their school, and then played for a while, and maybe they had wonderful dreams of making it big, and then they blew it to me, and now they're coaching. Right? I would expect some sort of story like that. I would expect the same thing hiring an Agile coach. If I knew nothing about hiring an Agile coach, I would know enough to expect experience. I would know enough to hear some story of, I did Agile for 10 or 15 years, and, I did this and blah, blah, blah. And then I've been on several projects, and also I would expect a story like that. And I've helped other people. Now I'm coaching. That is like, how can you not figure this out on your own? Right? But apparently they can't. So, and then you go, that makes a lot of sense. We should ask, our coaches should be experienced in Agile. Like, I didn't think about that. So what do you do? And of course, these consulting companies are taking advantage of all this. So there's some challenges. So, and there's some great, don't get me wrong, there's some great consulting companies out there, and there's some great coaches out there. But there's, I think, as Martin Fowler and many others are saying, there's something very seriously wrong going on in the Agile community right now. Yeah. And I don't see a lot of pushback. I hear complaining and stuff like that, but I don't see enough pushback.
Right.
And I think that's a moral challenge, I think, or maybe an ethical challenge for us.
So there's a couple of things in there that I wouldn't mind picking apart. The first was, you mentioned that some programmers we're just not clued up on Agile, and I put my hand up to say that I certainly am not clued up at all. I've done Agile as I think Agile should have been done because someone has told me to do it in such a way, but I don't know whether that was strictly Agile. And I've worked in places where people have told me to do certain Agile processes, but not all of the Agile processes. I don't know if that was correct or what have you. Some places we didn't do scrums, that kind of thing. Some places we didn't do other bits and pieces. So I think that us programmers, we get this sort of like disjointed knowledge of what Agile should actually be based on our previous experience. Is there like an industry standard of Agile and perhaps an industry accepted accreditation of Agile?
No, there's not,
right.
And I don't think there ever will be. Okay. And I've actually been involved in a couple efforts by the ISO to put together an industry standard, and they just failed miserably.
Okay.
And it was an interesting experience, but it just crashed and burned. And what was interesting was the Agile folks sort of came to an agreement. We had our little nitnoid issues, but for the most part, we came to an agreement. But then when the classic standards people got involved, and the government, and particularly the representatives of the U.S. military, who were for these things, then it just blew up. And so there's been several rounds of this. Now, I was involved in the first two, and I think there's been 2 or 3 others after that, but it never really went anywhere, just because there was just this very huge cultural gap between the standards people and the Agile people. But your point is right. Like there is no even reasonable consensus that's been published. Like, and I think, and unfortunately, like these get rich quick schemes get in the way, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't see a lot of, when you're trying to certify people in a 2-day workshop, you get limited very quickly into what type of material you can cover. And I think the other challenge, as we know, and we know this as software professionals, that is software development is complex. Yeah. This is why if it was easy, if you could master it in a 2-day course, then we would not get paid what we're getting paid, right? We'd be all getting minimum wage because it'd be an absolutely trivial thing. So I think, first of all, we need to wake up and accept the fact that things are harder than we like to, this is inherently complex. Let's embrace that. because it's inherently complex, it tells you your answer to how do we do software development effectively will at least be complicated. And it's not about holding a 15-minute stand-up meeting every day and holding a demo every so often. Those are great things, but and they can help in certain situations. But that's not really what software development is all about. And it's also not about the technical things as well, right? Certainly the technical things are important, but the way that we interact with people and our mindset and our focus on quality and things like that also very, very important. And the order in which we do work. So we often talk about pushing testing left in the life cycle. Well, yes, that's a great thing. But you know what? We're also pushing thinking right in the life cycle. So we should be pushing modeling or mapping, whatever you want to call that, all the way through the life cycle, planning all the way through the life cycle. So as software people, we tend to focus on the technical fun things that we like and the sexy things. And somehow testing became sexy, but which you wouldn't have predicted 20 years ago. But so we like to focus on the fun things, but we then tend to sort of ignore the importance of all the other aspects of the overall effort. And this is where we get hung up. And I think and we really need to have a better handle on this. So, for example, UX design thinking is becoming popular again, right? And this is the third round of this that I've seen in my career. And we're making the exact same mistakes we made in the other two rounds that I saw. But which is, some of us will learn, some of us won't, and that's okay. But it's really sort of a shame that why the heck are we on round 3? Like to me, that's a fundamental question. Why didn't the first 2 rounds stick? And it was because it's hard and it requires skill and it's hard to predict sometimes. So there's many, and it is a skillful endeavor. So we need to appreciate it more. And maybe it's not as sexy and fun as playing with the current release of PHP or whatever. So, as exciting as that is. So anyway, we've got to, we've got to appreciate that. And so I think there's a lot of challenges there. And, and then, we can, I could rant about the education system and that, but, the educators are doing the best they can if people are even going to school and if people are reading and, so there's there's some significant challenges.
That's a really good point because you get self-taught developers, right?
Yeah.
Do you get self-taught agile coaches?
All the time.
Right.
People pull themselves up by their bootstraps. One of the things that I do, that I like to do is whenever we get a resume in for somebody, first thing I do, I go straight to LinkedIn and see what their background is. And sometimes you can see some deep experience in Agile. Great. I want to talk to them. Other times you see, they'll have whatever background. And then 6 months ago, they took a Scrum workshop and then they might have been on one project. And now they think they're a coach with 6 months of experience under their belt. And to be fair to them, they gotta pay the mortgage, they gotta make money, and frankly they can get away with this. So they do, I caught you, but you know what? The next person probably won't. So why not? And they're also looking. They gotta get they gotta build their resume and get experience and all that sort of stuff. But so the point I want to make is that you can start. You can very easily start to figure out, is this person self-taught? Is this, are they even qualified? So, if they'd taken a workshop like that workshop, 5 years ago and been working on projects, or 10 years ago and been working on projects and doing, whatever in various Agile experiences, then maybe now, maybe they're qualified to coach, if they've got the, the people skills and all good sort of stuff. But certainly after 6 months, no way.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So we've talked a lot about how Agile is great, and all the benefits. Is there any negatives of Agile?
I think the hard question. So it's a good question. Yeah. So I think that the negatives are it does take time to learn. It does require a culture and a mind shift. But it also requires a skill shift. So I think the Agile community, there's a huge focus on the mind shift change, which is difficult to do, but it's also the easy thing to do in transformations, which is sort of weird advice. But being Agile is absolutely critical, but doing Agile is also critical as well. So if you do, it's great that you get the mindset, but if you don't have the skills to the job, you still can't do the job. So sure. I think, and we've sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater on that one in some cases. So I think there's, so a big downside of Agile and becoming better is it takes time. You need to invest in your staff. You need to invest in your people. Mm-hmm. And this is threatening from an organization. It's expensive and time consuming, which management doesn't like to hear usually. And it also goes against the current culture in a lot of organizations in a lot of countries. The relationship between employers and employees have fallen apart, and the employers have treated over the last couple of decades have treated people reasonably poorly and have not invested in them and have not helped them in their careers as much, and have treated them like replaceable parts in many ways. And the people have picked up on this. People are smart. So now people are contracting, and there's a lot of contractors. There's a lot of gig type engagements, and when you're a contractor, some of the contractors are very good and very caring, but usually they're just there. I'm on a 6-month contract. I'm gonna get this job done. I'm gonna do the best I can. Hopefully, maybe if I like this company, I'll hopefully try to get another contract. But I'm not really thinking long term. I'm not really long term for the company. I'm not really, and particularly if it's a project, then the company is already thinking short term, and more than likely are shooting themselves in the foot on increasing their technical debt and building yet another silo system and all these other problems. And then we've got these short-term contractors who are also thinking that way. So we end up really harming ourselves, organizationally, we harm ourselves in the long run by doing this. Now, that's not an Agile thing. That's just a bad management thing. But now we have got to dig our way out of this hole. We need to start treating people better, and this is an important part of Agile. We need to invest in our staff, and we need to treat them as if they're actually valuable humans, and not just the rhetoric, but the actual action required to do this. And this is very problematic in a lot of organizations. They're just not used to this. The executives have treated IT like a black box, like the big consulting companies have come along for a good decade or so and said, well, if IT is not your thing, you should outsource it. You should focus on your bread and butter. You should outsource the things you're not good at.
Yeah.
Any company that followed that advice is now screwed. Completely and utterly out of luck. Because what's happened is every organization now is a software organization. So if you are not fundamentally the banks, yesterday I was working with a bank, that's a software organization that just happens to make money selling you banking services. My insurance company is a software organization. It just happens to make money selling me insurance. My grocery store down the street happens to be a software company that just happens to make money selling bananas. This is how management needs to think. So any organization that basically outsourced either large portions or almost completely outsourced IT is in very serious trouble these days. And how do you dig your way out of this hole, right? So we need to start building up. This expertise. We need to start treating our people well and attracting them and retaining them and allowing them to actually improve and get better and do all these cool DevOps things and all this cool process improvement stuff that as an organization we desperately want. Like, why wouldn't we want to get better? But that requires investment in time and a very different mindset on the part of our executives. And Agile makes this apparent. So this, I don't want, I'm blaming Agile for this, but it's not fair to blame Agile for this. We're just making, we're basically pulling on the thread, this organizational thread of our sweater, and everything's unraveling now. And so Agile is making this apparent. So, the Scrum folks are pretty clear about this. Scrum makes these problems apparent. Okay, that's fine, but we need to take the next step and actually, how do we fix these problems? Because, pointing out, hey, you got a problem, that really sucks. Too bad for you. Yeah, that's nice, but doesn't get the job done, right? It's not what we need.
Sure.
So we need to fix these problems now, and this requires hard work and time, and people who know what they're doing. And I think that becomes a challenge, is that our executives are not, for the most part, not change professionals. They and they have very short time frames, right? You end up with you got to make your numbers for the quarter or at worst your year, right? Like this to be the longest time frame that most organizations have, and they pretend to do strategic stuff, but for the most part, gotta make my numbers for the year to get my bonus, right? So there's a lot of short-term thinking that just doesn't get the job done, and Agile requires long-term.
Yeah. It's like
well,
definitely it's a slow burning thing. It's not like a sudden fix. My organizational structure or the development flow is wrong. Just put in Agile and it'll be done in a week. That is not the right mindset.
There are no easy answers here, and there's no easy fixes. But there's a lot of people trying to sell you easy fixes, and it's great, right? It's like, I'm obviously a big guy, and could benefit from changing my lifestyle. But the fact is, if you want to get healthier, if you want to lose weight, it takes time, right? You got to eat better, you got to exercise better, and you got to stick at it, right? There's no miracle 2-day miracle diet or 2-week miracle diet. It's a change your lifestyle.
Sure,
that's what gets the job done. And this is the exact same thing with process improvement. Change your lifestyle. Sure. Do the hard work, change your lifestyle, and be disciplined enough to stay at it. So that and how do you do that when you've got a quarter based or an annual based mindset? You can't.
Yeah.
And then the executives, of course, turn over constantly. You get reorg the organization, all this sort of stuff. So how do you stick at it? It's very difficult.
I also think that perhaps people the execs or people in charge will consider Agile at the worst possible time, because their backs are up against the wall because something's gone wrong and they don't have the right process in place to put in procedures and stuff to make that environment better for everybody. Whereas it would have been easier if that would have been implemented on the get-go.
And I try to have these discussions with executives all the time, and they're almost always, a lot of them will leave it to the last minute or what they believe, and particularly when you think there's going to be an easy fix, then there's no real need to worry about it until you're actually hosed. But the problem is that this is, it really does take many, many years. And a lot of companies now have a very short window to improve things. And, you get, like in the financial world, you get all these fintechs that are disrupting things. And that, that's an easy thing. But what do you do when you have these alpha competitors like the Googles and the Amazons and the eBays and the Apples of the world coming after you? But by the time you're targeted by Amazon, it's probably too late. You need to be shoring up your defenses now. So if, as an executive, if you have any sort of inkling that an Amazon or an eBay or one of those types of companies might decide to get into your space, or if you're worried that some up and coming startup, fintech or some other tech company, might come in and, eat your lunch. If you've got an inkling that that's an issue, you got to get going now. As at the point in time where you can detect that you're under threat, it's probably too late. Sure.
Yeah, totally agree on that. Okay. So you work at Disciplined Agile. Let's talk about that for a minute. What does that offer? What does Disciplined Agile offer?
Yeah, so Disciplined Agile started with a focus on software development, on Disciplined Agile delivery, and So with Disciplined Agile delivery, we were answering the question: how does this work from beginning to end? How do you if you're still doing projects, how do you successfully initiate a project, do the construction stuff, release into production? If you're doing continuous delivery, then how do you support a long-standing product team or a long-standing team? If you're doing some sort of a lean startup thing, then how do you do that? So so we basically answered the question: how does this all fit together? And we in all aspects of software development, not just the stuff that's easy to certify you in, like, here's how to run a meeting. Oh, congratulations, you're a certified master. No, it's like, well, how the heck does architecture fit in? How the heck does testing fit in, and UX fit in, and the evil management stuff fit in, and the evil governance stuff fit in? All this stuff fit together in a streamlined manner. And how do you make it as lightweight but still sufficient as possible? And that's actually and because every person is unique and every team is unique, how do you actually give people choices to allow them to do the right thing in the situation they face, as opposed to the one official way that I want to certify you in? Sure. And that becomes a very and remembering that software development is a very complex thing. So, how does it all fit together? And when might you use a technique and when might you not want to, and to what extent? These are very hard questions to answer. And so we've done our best to answer these questions. And so then that was Disciplined Agile delivery. And then the next layer on top of that is Disciplined DevOps. So how do you do DevOps in an enterprise class situation? And it's not just this, figure eight, the figure eight infinite loop CI/CD stuff, which is important but great. But you've also got to ask basic questions, right? So how do we bring security into the mix? How do so DevSecOps? How do we bring database stuff into the mix? Like, I go to organizations and they'll all the time they tell me, hey, we're doing DevOps, we've been doing it for a couple of years and we're awesome. Look at us, see, we got Jenkins running over here. Ooh, we're doing DevOps. Yeah, okay, but how long does it take you to make a change to a production database? Oh, well, got to add a column and it take us 6 weeks. So you're not really doing DevOps then, are you? It takes you 6 weeks to make an absolutely trivial change. That's not DevOps. Oh, well, that's data stuff. That doesn't count. It does count. It really does. So how do you bring the database stuff in? And, into questions, how do you do support and help desk, chatbot, whatever you want to do? How do you do that in a large organization where I might not even know what systems I'm using, let alone who to contact to get help, right? So how do we escalate challenges, or how do you solve as many as we can before it even gets to a human? But then if it does get to a human, how do we escalate? How do we do release management or release coordination when we have hundreds or thousands of teams in flight? I'm a firm believer in the you build it, you run it type of mentality. Actually, my very first book, The Object Primer in 95, was talking about that. But that's that sort of stuff. But the how do you do that when you have how do you allow hundreds of teams releasing their production on their own? Well, there's a little bit of coordination going on. So how do we do that? And it might not be a release train, but it might be. But there's better ways of doing things. But anyways, it's one option. So how does all this stuff fit together? How do we bring the business people involved in biz DevOps? So what happens? So it's interesting. So if you look at all the various things that the DevOps community wants to talk about, like DevSecOps and biz DevOps and database DevOps and all these other, and all of them are important. But once you start actually looking at the bigger picture and ask, how does that fit together? You go way beyond this, little figure eight thing, which I love, but it's just wonderful marketing. But that's about it. So, so we got to look at the bigger picture, and it's interesting. And once you start looking at the bigger picture, it goes way beyond the agile developer vision of CI/CD as DevOps, which is fine. So that's the second layer. Then the next layer is, well, how do we do the rest of IT? Because it's not just about DevOps, and the DevOps folks are getting pretty good at this now. They start realizing, well, it's DevOps for IT, and there's all these different terms. They're struggling with that, but how do you govern all this sort of stuff? How do you do reuse across all these teams, and how do you do HR, like people management stuff across all these teams? So how do you do portfolio management and good things like that? So there's a lot of aspects of IT that go way beyond DevOps. So how do you do that in a streamlined manner? Right? And then finally, how do you actually do business agility? So how do we take advantage of this? How do we do value streams? How do we do finance? How do you do procurement? Right. So this is a huge challenge for agilists. Right. We're very good at the technical, programming, techie bithead software development stuff. But then as soon as we have to interact with the finance team and they want to have some sort of detailed upfront estimate, suddenly, it's like throwing an anchor on your neck when you're trying to swim. Their procurement processes are a disaster in most organizations, and they try their best, but they shoot you in the foot every time. And so, how do we be agile at that? How do we be agile at marketing? How do we be agile at like HR, people management stuff? There's a lot of aspects, because if you don't get that right, then you really can't. You're really not an agile organization, and these are all hard topics. And the challenge is and it's all got to fit together. So this is what we do in Disciplined Agile. We look at the overall challenge that we face, and it's not pretty at all. but this is the reality, right? And our point is we need this all fits together. You need to get fitting together reasonably well, and you need to help the finance people become agile, help the HR people become agile, and here's how we can do that.
Sure.
And this I think is the challenge that we face, and it's certainly more than a 2-day certification program to teach you how to run a few meetings. So we really do need to look at this bigger picture, and then of course the challenge is one size does not fit all. Every organization is unique.
Sure.
So you need to build a learning culture in your organization that enables teams to actually learn, improve, and get better, and experiment, and as well get the job done and interact with each other effectively. And that's hard. And there's no easy solution to this other than do the hard work. This is hard work. You got to do it. You got to get going on it as soon as you can.
It must be, yeah. I mean, it must be quite challenging in some cases to because you are literally altering the culture of the organization, pointing out the flaws, replacing them with different processes. Change isn't easy at all. So yeah, it must be, but again, it must be very rewarding to snip out, I guess what I would term as perhaps, a problem area, right? And replace that with something which is more efficient and more streamlined, like you mentioned. I didn't even consider Agile past what I do as a programmer. So in terms of what you just mentioned, DevOps and databases, and then even touching upon the different departments, I didn't even consider that Agile could do all that. Of course it can, and of course Agile, as we mentioned before this interview, Agile can be used outside of software development, which is obvious if you think about it, really, but
well, it is, right? So if you're a small startup company, a few people, coding something, fine, and you're in your software development team. But if you're in any sort of an effort that's larger than that, then your software development team will be interacting with others, right? So in Agile, we've got this concept of a whole team that you should have enough skills, enough resources, enough ability, enough people, and money to get the job done. This is a complete and utter myth. This is like just observably not true, right? So, and the reason why I say this, and I can back this up with numbers, I can literally back this up with industry. 97% of Agile teams are not whole. Right. 97%. I'm not a mathematician, but I believe that's the majority. And anyways, so yeah, and the reason why I say they're not whole is that if you've got to interact with another team to get the job done. So for example, if my software development team has to go to the finance people for money to finance whatever it is that we're doing, then we're not whole. We don't have the money. We don't have the resources we need to do the job done. If I have to go and interact with the release management people in order to get access to to Jenkins, or get access to whatever we do, or even be allowed to release in production, I'm not whole. My team's not whole. We had to go to them, right? So this is common, which is fine. Like, I want to be as whole as possible, but we need to collaborate effectively with these other teams. And so there's interesting implications to that. And one of them is that, if say Agile is brand new to our organization, my team is the pilot team that learns how to do Agile, right? So say that's our situation. As soon as my team starts becoming Agile, because my team might be interacting with 7 or 8 other teams to get the job done, those 7 or 8 other teams also need to become more Agile themselves. They should take the opportunity to learn and get better, or they need to get out of the way.
Right.
So give me an organizational pass, basically. So this is the challenge. So I think, so when you talk to these people, when you talk to people who are, their organization is struggling, or they're a little bit frustrated because they're coaching a team and there's all this outside nonsense going on. Well, yeah, because, it's like, don't complain to me that it's hard to get money out of the finance people because they want all this, all these estimates up front. Interact effectively, like learn about finance, be qualified, right? Learn about finance, learn about, give them options and figure out how we can actually achieve whatever goals the finance people are trying to get at, and yet still be as agile as possible, and help them to understand Agile and help them to start working in more Agile manners, right? Don't stick your head in the sand. And this is hard, right? So, and this is very hard. So, you you have to do that. Like, you've got to go in at the very beginning realizing, wait a minute, our team's not whole, never will be, total myth, and we've got to work effectively with others, and that means we need to help those other teams as well become more agile. And that means, as a coach, I need to first understand that, I need to have the skills to do that, or I need to have access to other people that can help me do that. Either way, right? So this is the challenge we face, or it crashes and burns. Right, it's like I was saying this earlier. Like, it's like having an anchor through. My team is really totally awesome agile, but then the procurement guys throw an anchor under neck, or the finance people throw an anchor under neck. So we're done. Right? We're done. And this is the challenge that I see over and over and over again with agile coaches and with agile teams, or teams trying to become more agile, is that the rest of the organization is really sort of holding them back. And they're not engaging well, and often they're not allowed to engage is the real problem. Yeah. Or the executives don't understand the importance of allowing them to engage, because they're looking for a simple answer, right? Let's just do Scrum on this team and things will be fine. Well, no, we touch too many other parts, so we've got to help them too.
This is true. This is very, very true. I hadn't thought of it like that. That's how deeply integrated everything is. Yeah, I mean, even, working with graphics designers who aren't coders at all, they are still part of the process, because they still need to build the design. Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
And that's the thing. Like, so the graphic designer, they need to understand how they fit in. They need to become more, becoming more agile and more collaborative. Same thing with the coders. And as a coder, I need to appreciate what the graphic designer is trying to do and leverage them and learn from them, and vice versa. And this has been an organizational challenge that we've had for years, that because all these things are complex and require skill, we want to specialize, right? We want to have the graphic designer, the coder, the tester. And we have this fantasy that, the graphic designer can do their thing and throw their stuff over the wall to the coder who does their thing, and so on. And it doesn't work that way at all. We need to collaborate. We need to learn, and we need to work closely. We need to learn from each other and appreciate what the others are doing. Because, to be fair to the graphic, I've seen wonderful graphic designs done. And then you ask basically, so how are we going to implement that? And it's like, well, that's not my problem. Well, it really is, because your beautiful design can't be implemented. Mm-hmm. I was involved with a customer about 2 years ago, and they hired this outside firm to do the truly awesome, beautiful design. I got to give them credit for the work they did. And then I'm sitting in the reality meeting, and where they're walking us through what they've already shown to the executives and gotten the blessing of the executives for. And then I turned to the data architect and said, "Do we actually have that data?" And the guy said, "No, we can't build that. We're like 2 years away from that." And meanwhile, they're promising, "Oh, yes, it's going to be done in a few months." And it's like, yeah, but you just wanted me data to support it. Other than that, though, yeah, it's awesome, beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
And it's because they didn't collaborate, right? They went off and did their specialty, and they did an awesome job with their specialty, but it all fell apart when you had to look at the big picture. And I think this is, and I'm sure you've seen coders going off and producing a truly beautiful piece of code, a truly awesome thing, and then people, yeah, we didn't need that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, certainly. Lots of stories there I could mention where me and other coders that I'm aware of who've spent the whole bank holiday Monday working on something that isn't going to be used.
Yeah. Wasted your time.
Yeah.
Right? And that was and that would have been a conversation.
That would have been an email or a conversation or some form of ticket. The issue that would have been talked about and talked over, but you can't, as a coder, you can't code alone. You just can't. You just simply can't do that. I think that coders are more used to Agile. I think because we are the people who push the button, throw the thing over the fence, and that becomes more of the release sort of part of Agile. But yeah, it's interesting to hear the fact that other parts of the other departments, other people that connect to the code in some way, shape or form, are also part of this big moving wheel called Agile. I think that sometimes they can become underrepresented, perhaps. Especially, I mean, on the Scrum meetings that I've been involved, it has mostly been coders, which I guess is not great.
Well, yeah, and a challenge. So our business stakeholders, stakeholders in general, they've got their normal jobs to do, right?
Sure,
they can't be attending all these stand-up meetings all the time. They don't have the time, and they don't care.
No.
They really, it's because they've been told, the business has been treat IT like a black box, and they've had this drilled into them for decades now. So to be fair, that they're understaffed and they're overwhelmed, and they got a lot of other things to do too, right? So the last thing they need to hear about is these teams, these technical teams wanting help. So we need to educate them, and we need to, we need to help them understand the importance of this. But also the thing is as software professionals, we need to understand the domain better, and we need to do reality check, and we need to understand our own jobs better. So, this example where this design team went off and built this beautiful thing that couldn't be built, that's just incompetence. It's like, why the heck didn't somebody ask at the very beginning, can this be built? And this is a very serious issue, and they didn't do it, right? And because it's inconvenient. Like I said this earlier, like it's, one of the things about Agile is it's all about shortening the feedback cycle, but the inconvenient thing about asking for feedback is you get it, and it might not be what you want to hear, right? So, and also to be fair to this design team, they were probably told, do this. Your job is to produce a wonderful design. Go off and do that. Do the best you can. And they're all front end, right? They're not worrying about the actual implementations. They're not their problem. And there might not have been anybody with those skills on the team, at all. So it's not, and certainly it's not their problem. But they still should have known, right? They still should have been looking, thinking about the bigger picture and doing basic reality checks long before they presented something.
The horizontal view of things. Yeah. Okay, so with Disciplined Agile, are you? There's a team there, right? And they go off and they coach these organizations to run in an agile kind of manner. Is that correct?
Yeah. So so as a company, we ourselves do coaching. We're slowly moving away from that into more than the partner enablement. We do training and coaching and good things like that. But we're working more and more with partners internationally now because we just don't have the bandwidth. And so we go in, we provide training, coaching at multiple levels. So we're firm believers in engaging with the executives, with middle management, and with the development teams. And this, I think, is another challenge I see in a lot of agile transformations, is that there's this attitude, well, we'll get the executives on board, we'll get the developers on board, and we'll just squeeze middle management. And middle management doesn't appreciate that for some reason, and they push back. And they're phenomenally good at playing politics. So, and they're smart people that could be very useful and valuable if you help them make this transition. So we're firm believers, and most of our successes have been where we've positively engaged middle management and helped them to improve themselves. And that's hard. That can be very hard. Yeah. But it's very valuable too.
Yeah. Well, Scott, it was great to talk to you about Agile and what you guys do. It's a very interesting subject, and it's opened my eyes a lot in terms of what Agile is, based upon my previous misconceptions. If someone wants to get in touch, how would they do so?
Yeah, so that, we maintain a few sites. I guess the critical one is probably disciplinedagile.com. There's a hyphen there, so disciplined-agile.com. DisciplinedAgileDelivery.com is more of a informational WordPress-based blog informational site. A lot of good information there. And then Disciplined Agile Consortium, no hyphens at all, .org. Right. Where we do the some services and like training and the training offerings are there, and the certification stuff is there, and a bunch and information as well.
Awesome. I'll provide links in the show notes below. Do you have any Twitter handles, anything like that?
Yeah, Scott W. Ambler.
Cool. Awesome. And before we dive off, is there anything else that you would like to add or mention in terms of Agile, what we've discussed?
Yeah, no, I think this is a great conversation. I think Agile's here to stay. Definitely, I would like to see Agile practitioners become just actively try to learn. Like if you can build up this learning mentality and learn widely. It's not just I want to become the best darn Java programmer in the world and learn everything to know about Java, which is great. But please also learn about testing and analysis and design and mapping and all these other great things and because it's important and learn learn about the domain. One of the things I love about my job is I get to go into all these organizations around the world and learn about very interesting domains that I really had no idea about. And what I always find interesting is that when I don't know anything about something, it's like, oh, it's got to be pretty easy and straightforward. And then as soon as you start looking at it, whoa, this is so complex and cool and interesting. And there's all these really interesting issues that you'd have no idea were going on until you started looking at it. So this is what I really like. But yeah, so just, become, focus on learning, focus on experimentation, focus on sharing your own skills and collaborating with others. That's what I always like to leave people with. Yeah,
that's good advice. That's very good advice. Well, Scott, thank you ever so much for coming on and spending some time with me this evening. It's been great speaking to you.
Yeah, fantastic.
Excellent.
Have a great day.
And for everyone who's watching on the YouTubes and listening on the podcast, happy coding. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.